Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Nico and I welcome you to this year's edition of What Class to Play in Black Desert Online. This guide is supposed to give you a rough overview of all the available classes in terms of strengths and weaknesses. This video is also based on the current PC meta, which the Xbox version will eventually catch up to. With that being said, and without further ado, let's get going. Starting off with the Dark Knight. Dark Knights start up with a Kriegsmesser pre-awakening weapon, which is basically a sword. And once you hit level 56, you get a Vidiant, which is basically floating crystal swords of swords. Their grind ability is actually amazing. Through the board, from the start to the end, Dark Knights shine when it comes to grinding. From low-end spots to high-end spots, all around a very, very good grinder. Small scale PvP on the other hand, it's not as convincing. Same with large scale, but once we have a certain amount of AP, just like with all the other classes as well, Dark Knight can perform. Sustainability as well, Dark Knight offers a lot of defensive iframes, and if played correctly is very, very slithery and evasive. Difficulty is also rather low, so for beginners definitely a class to check out. Next up is the Warrior, starting with a sword and a shield and obtaining a greatsword once you level 56. Warriors start off a little bit lackluster due to their extreme skill point and gear scaling. So early game you'll be more taking on the role of a support class, but once you hit those important skill point and AP thresholds, this class is a threat to deal with. Also difficulty wise, early game, this class is actually pretty easy. I would even rate it a lot lower than difficulty 3 in this scenario. But the higher level warrior is very complex and it's a very, very hard class to master. So keep that in mind when picking warrior up. Next up is the Valkyrie that uses a sword and a shield in pre-awakening and a Lancia in the awakening. First off, the grinding. The grinding wise, Valkyrie suffers a little bit in the beginning, but once hitting awakening and certain AP thresholds, she's actually one of the better high-end grinders in the game. Same with small scale and large scale PvP, she's probably the burstiest or one of the burstiest classes in the game. That ties in though with the difficulty, since pulling off those bursts and having the proper mobility with this class is actually pretty hard to pull off. So, get to practice, boys. The Ranger. Starting off with a longbow, she's a very range-esque class and has a lot of ranged utility, but once hitting level 56 you gain a Camosilvan sword, which offers you a lot of melee utility and damage as well. A lot of burst damage. Grind and small scale PvP wise, she's middle of the road, nothing special but nothing crazy either. Large scale PvP she's already falling off, and especially with her sustainability being that low, she's considered one of the weaker classes in the game at the moment, on top of being kind of hard to get used to and hard to master, since there's a lot of animation cancels you have to learn. One of the best looking classes in the game, Ninja, starts out with a short sword and gets a Shura Katana as an awakening weapon, which is not even only a single one, but there's multiple that you obtain. Grind-wise, Ninja starts off fairly slow, but once you reach higher level spots, Ninja can be pretty decent. Small scale PvP, one of the best, if not the best 101 class in the entire game. Large scale on the other hand, it's kind of hard to make use of this class, but if you know what you're doing and if you know how to use your burst efficiently, then this class can be a very big threat to deal with as well. Difficulty-wise, on the other hand, it's also very hard, as I said, to get used to this class and get all of the animation cancels and combos down. So maybe not so much a beginner-friendly class, but definitely a fun one to watch and play. The Kunoichi, the female version of a ninja, but is a completely different class once you reach your awakening weapon. Uses a short sword, pre-awakening as well, but then gets a Sa Chakram, which is basically a blade hula hoop, which is kind of unique. Grinding-wise, this class I would actually rate a little bit higher than Ninja, but at the same time, she also doesn't have the best utility for it. Small-scale PvP, not as on the same level as Ninja as well, but is a very big problem to deal with if you find someone that actually mastered this class. Both large scale and sustainability is pretty similar to Ninja as well, and difficulty wise also very hard to get used to and very hard to master it as well. Next up is the Tamer. She wields a short sword in the pre-awakening and a bow staff in the awakening, which is basically an elemental melee weapon. Grind-wise, she's middle of the pack. On the other hand though, small-scale PvP, she shines once the class is in the right hands. As you can see in the difficulty rating, this class is very hard to play properly, but once you have all the skills and animation cancels down and the AP to back it up, this class is scary in 101. Also, large-scale PvP-wise, Tamer's ultimate got buffed by a huge amount, and now she's even a threat in large-scale PvP as well. Striker. One of the favorite classes in the game for me, and one of the most bursty ones as well. Striker wields a gauntlet in pre-awakening and a guard brace in awakening, which is basically the same thing. The only difference is that in the awakening you have more fiery spells and clones that help you fight. Grind-wise, Striker is very good early game, or I would say better than average early game, but once the high-end spots come around, Striker takes a step back. Now let's see other classes have some fun. It's regarded as one of the worst endgame grinders in the game. Small-scale PvP and large-scale PvP, on the other hand, is huge for this class. High burst, high mobility, and high iframes and sustainability as well, as you can see. And on top of that, the class is not very hard to get into. A very understandable and straightforward class. The Mystic, the female counterpart to Striker, wields a gauntlet in pre-awakening and a cestus in awakening, which is also both gauntlets. The only difference again is that in awakening she's supported by water abilities and water dragons, which is pretty cool. Grind-wise, she's one of the best classes in the entire game from start to finish. High-end spots, great class for grinding. If you're looking for a grind class, this is probably it. On top of that, she has amazing sustainability, which allows her to grind very high-end spots without using a lot of potions. On top of that, small-scale and large-scale PvP, she's one of the best top-of-the-hill classes that you can pick up. This class is overall the most well-rounded, or I almost want to say OP class that you can pick up from the start to finish. And on top of that, it's even new player friendly and kind of easy to understand, so go for it. Next up is the Meiwa. She wields a blade in the Pre-Awakening and a Carry Spear in the Awakening with icy attacks. Grind-wise, small-scale and large-scale PvP, she's regarded as a very decent, well-rounded class, but nothing special, unfortunately. She's also kind of hard to get used to, since she's a very fast class, and her sustainability is very lackluster as well. A lot of people say this is just the worst version of Musa at the moment. The male counterpart to Meiwa, the Musa wields a blade in the Pre-Awakening as well and has a crescent blade once you hit Awakening with fiery attacks, as you can see in the picture in the trailer. Grind-wise, Musa is very good at low HP spots since he's one of the fastest classes in the entire game and has very good AoE contrary to the Meiwa. Small scale and large scale PvP, this class is also pretty solid, but not the very top of the hill. Sustainability is also kind of lackluster, but since Meiwa and Musa are very fast, they can evade and dodge a lot of attacks. Difficulty-wise, he's a little bit easier than the Meiwa. Next up is the Sorceress, one of the flashiest classes in the game, wielding a scythe in the Awakening and an amulet in Pre-Awakening. Her grinding is very solid and her small scale is as well, but you have to keep in mind that it's very hard to play this class to an extent and to a level that you can actually perform on. It's one of the hardest, if not the hardest classes in the game. The other downside is that sustainability in large scale PvP are somewhat lackluster. In large scale, she's used as an ultimate dispenser, I want to say, because her ultimate is very useful. Outside of that, she's more of a squishy sideline class that tries to flank and assassinate targets. Next up is the Wizard. Pre-Awakening Staff, Awakening Godder Sphere, which is basically fire and water spells. Grind-wise, this class offers a lot of utility and has a lot of AoE. Later on, there's a couple of grind spots that require group utility, and this class is perfect for that. Small-scale PvP, on the other hand, this class is easier to play around, but since he has a grab, he can still be a threat. Large-scale PvP, Wizard and Witch are the most sought-after classes in the entire game, since they have huge AoE buffs and heals. Difficulty-wise, it's also very easy to get used to and get into, so newer player friendly. Next up is the Witch, the female counterpart to Wizard and also the elemental counterpart to Wizard. Pre-Awakening is a staff, and Awakening is an ad sphere, which is basically lightning and earth spells. Grind-wise, she's very similar to Wizard. Small-scale PvP, on the other hand, she's a little bit more stationary and does not have a grab. Large-scale, as I said before, one of the most sought after classes in the entire game, and also very easy to play. So all new players should definitely look into witches and wizards. Berserker starts off with axes and gets a hand cannon, which is also called Iron Buster, for an awakening weapon. Grind-wise, the class is from start to finish a very solid choice. Small-scale PvP as well, but that one is very, very skill-dependent, and large-scale PvP can be made use of even with a lower skill level. Sustainability is amazing as well, and overall, one of the most solid classes in the entire game. One of the most recent additions to the game, the Lan, starts out with the Crescent Pendulum and obtains a Crimson Glaive once she hits level 56. Grind-wise, she's top of the hill, same as small-scale PvP. The only downside is that she's hard to play, and her sustain is fairly lackluster. So she has to chug more potions than other very good grinders. The major downside, though, is her large-scale PvP availability and viability. Lan's only real bonus or advantage she has in large scale PvP over other classes is that she can fly over or glide over obstacles and flank raids more efficiently. Outside of that, she's regarded as one of the worst large scale PvP classes in the game. The most recent addition to the game, Archer. Crossbow and Greatbow from the get-go, which is the first of its kind. Grind-wise, one of the best classes in the game, same with large-scale PvP. The only problem this class really has is that he's very squishy and he lacks a lot of stamina. So if you want to stack stamina, this is the class to do it on. Small-scale PvP he also falls off a little bit because he's very squishy, and his super armors and forward guards are also not very convenient, I should say. Difficulty-wise, also not too hard to learn, not too hard to get into, very straightforward, and a solid range class to pick up. And that's it, all of the 17 classes covered. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any comments, any opinions, please leave them in the comment section down below. Also, a big shout out to Fenrisulf, Kingofallgape, Ion Yanis, Namiko, and Fallout for helping me out getting all of the meta and all of the strengths and weaknesses of the classes together. All of their links will be in the description below. Thank you again so much for watching. This is a pretty long video, so thank you for listening to all of it, and see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.